The surveillance vessel Kerox 9 drifted at the edge of mapped space, its engines idling in silence while its sensors drank in the dark. Commander Threx Valkyr stood alone at the central holotable, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on streams of data that should have been empty. This region had been classified as inert for 3 centuries. No trade lanes, no colonies, no signals worth cataloging. A dead scar left behind by a species that had supposedly burned itself out. Humans. The name lingered in Threx's thoughts with faint irritation. It surfaced every time junior officers grew careless, every time old war archives were accessed without context. Humans were a historical footnote, a cautionary myth used to frighten cadets into discipline. A violent species, yes. A stubborn one, certainly. But extinct all the same. Time devoured even the most ferocious civilizations. "Commander," said Sensor Officer Krellin, his voice tight but controlled. "Long-range passive array has returned an inconsistency." Threx did not turn. "Define inconsistency." "There is a mass shadow where none should exist. No radiation spike, no propulsion trace. It does not align with stellar drift models." Threx exhaled slowly. Space was full of errors, ghost echoes, gravitational lensing artifacts, debris clouds that fooled inattentive minds. Recalibrate and discard. Krellin hesitated. Threx heard it in the silence. "Recalibration complete, sir. The return persists." That earned Threx's attention. He stepped forward, the holotable reshaping itself to display a 3-dimensional void punctured by a faint, pulsing outline. The object was distant, barely more than a suggestion of form, but it was undeniably there. "How long has it been present?" Threx asked. "Unknown. Passive sensors only registered it once we adjusted for background noise. It may have been there for some time." "Does it move?" "Yes, Commander. Slowly. Against the gravitational gradient." Threx's jaw tightened. Nothing moved against the drift without intent. He keyed a command, pulling historical overlays into view. Ancient borders appeared, fractured maps of the so-called human expanse. The anomaly sat well within it. A murmur spread across the bridge. Threx silenced it with a glance. "Begin classification. Compare silhouette probability with archived designs. All eras." The ship's analytic core responded instantly, projecting percentages that fluctuated and then stalled. "Unknown. Unrecognized." Uncomfortable words for a system that prided itself on certainty. "What of active scans?" Threx asked. "Advisable but not recommended," Krellin replied. "If the object is dormant, active emission may provoke response." Response. Threx tasted the word and found it sour. "You believe it capable of reaction?" "I believe, Commander," Krellin said carefully, "that it is constructed." That settled it. Threx straightened, authority settling over him like armor. "Maintain passive observation. No transmissions. No course correction." As the crew returned to their stations, Threx studied the dim outline in silence. Legends whispered at the edge of reason. Stories of ships that ran dark, of captains who treated ambush as an art form. Humans had been said to fight not for territory but for survival itself, and in doing so had learned how to make war patient. Threx dismissed the thought. Myths grew teeth when logic failed. Minutes stretched. The object's vector shifted by a fraction, subtle enough to be missed by an untrained eye. Threx caught it immediately. "Confirm movement," he said. "Confirmed," Krellin replied. "Acceleration minimal but deliberate." Deliberate meant choice. "Distance?" Threx asked. "Closing," Krellin said. "At current rate, it will enter mid-range sensors within 1 standard cycle." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge. Threx felt it too, an old instinct buried beneath layers of training. He had commanded warships, negotiated ceasefires, watched suns die from afar. Yet this silent approach from a dead civilization, unsettled him in a way he could not name. "Has High Command been notified?" he asked. "Yes, Commander." Data packet transmitted. Awaiting response. Threx nodded and returned his gaze to the void. The object's outline sharpened incrementally as algorithms refined its shape. It was asymmetrical, scarred, devoid of the elegant curves favored by modern engineering. This was a vessel built to endure, not impress. A fragment of text flickered across the hollow table as the analytic core dredged something ancient from its depths. Not a match, merely an echo. A designation half-corrupted by time and translation. V. Purse. The fragment vanished before Threx could demand more. Krellin, he said quietly, run that comparison again. Priority override. The officer complied, fingers moving faster now. Commander, the database is incomplete. Large portions of human records were purged after the collapse. Of course they were, Threx murmured. Victors rewrote history, and survivors erased their own tracks. The object grew brighter, not from emission, but from proximity. It was close enough now that even unaugmented sensors could no longer deny its presence. Still, it remained dark. No challenge signal. No threat display. Just a silent, patient advance. Then it stopped. The suddenness of it sent a jolt through the bridge. One moment it was moving. The next, it rested perfectly still, as if it had reached precisely the point it intended all along. Commander, Krellin said, his voice barely above a whisper, it has altered orientation. Threx watched as the vessel's nose aligned, not toward the nearest star, not toward any strategic vector, but directly toward Kerox, 9. They know we're here, Krellin said. Threx did not answer at once. He felt the weight of command, the burden of choice pressing in on him. Whatever lay ahead, there would be no pretending this was debris or error. The legends had crossed from archive to reality. Continue observation, Threx said finally, and prepare the crew. For what, Commander? Krellin asked. Threx kept his eyes on the dark, waiting shape in the void. For the possibility, he said, that the stories were incomplete. As if in answer, a faint ripple passed across the sensors. Not a transmission, not an attack, but a single, undeniable confirmation of intent. The object had begun to move again, and this time, it was coming straight for them. The bridge of Kerox, 9 settled into a strained quiet as the unknown vessel closed the distance with unsettling patience. Commander Threx Valkyr remained motionless at the hollow table, watching the object's silhouette sharpen from an abstraction into something unmistakably engineered. Its hull bore the scars of age and repair, layered plating mismatched in tone and texture, as if survival had mattered more than symmetry. Mid-range sensors are now active by default, Krellin reported. Still no emissions. No shields. No visible weapon charging. Threx frowned. A warship that refused to announce itself was either supremely confident or already resigned to destruction. Neither possibility comforted him. Mass estimate. Higher than projected. Dense internal structure. Redundant compartments. Built to take punishment, Threx thought. That, too, aligned disturbingly well with the old stories. The vessel adjusted its orientation again, minute thruster corrections barely disturbing the surrounding dust. It was not drifting into proximity by chance. It was placing itself like a piece on a board. Open a channel, Threx ordered. Krellin hesitated only a fraction of a second before complying. A broad-spectrum greeting signal spilled into the void, encoded in standard diplomatic syntax, layered with mathematical constants meant to bridge language gaps. The signal echoed back as empty space. No response, Krellin said. Not even an automated acknowledgement. Threx felt a flicker of irritation. Then it hears us and chooses silence, he said. Or it never intended to speak at all. A low chime sounded from the analytic core, drawing every eye on the bridge. The hollow table flickered, reorganizing its projections. Threx leaned closer as fragmented data scrolled into view. Partial hull geometry matches, propulsion analogs, weapon mount probabilities. The classification bar stalled, then shifted to a color rarely seen. Pre-collapse human design. Probable. The bridge went very still. That designation is restricted, Krellin said carefully. Those records were deemed unreliable. Unreliable does not mean false, Threx replied. He straightened, forcing his posture into calm authority. Lock that analysis. I want every scrap of data preserved. The human vessel did something unexpected then. It accelerated. There was no warning flare, no buildup of energy that sensors could track. One moment it hung in the void. The next, it crossed a distance that should have taken minutes in the span of a breath. Inertial dampening readings spiked across Kerox 9's systems as automated defenses reacted to a perceived threat. Evasive protocols? Krellin asked sharply. Negative, Threx said. Hold position. The human ship decelerated just as abruptly, settling into a parallel vector with Kerox 9 at a range so close Threx could see surface detail with the naked eye through reinforced viewports. Deep gouges marked its hull, some ancient, some recent. This was not a relic preserved in a museum. It was a tool still in use. Commander, Krellin said, awe creeping into his voice despite his discipline, its drive output violates known efficiency limits. Humans were never concerned with known limits, Threx said quietly. For the first time, something reached out from the silent ship. A pulse rippled across the void, subtle enough that only passive systems caught it. It was not a weapon lock. It was not a scan, in any modern sense. It's pinging us, Krellin said. Low energy. Pattern-based. Threx studied the waveform as it unfolded. The analytic core worked furiously, peeling back layers of compression and archaic encoding. Symbols began to coalesce, rough and incomplete. It's not a demand, Krellin said slowly. It's an identifier. The translation resolved enough for meaning to emerge, jagged but unmistakable. UNV persever. The rest dissolved into static. A name, Threx realized. Not a fleet designation. Not a threat. A name spoken into the dark. Before Threx could order a reply, the perspective shifted, not on the holotable, but in his awareness, as if the distance between ships had momentarily ceased to matter. Aboard the human vessel, Captain Elias Rourke stood at his own command station, one hand resting on a console worn smooth by years of use. He was a broad-shouldered figure, his posture relaxed in a way that spoke of hard-earned confidence rather than carelessness. A thin scar traced a pale line along his jaw, disappearing into his collar. They're holding position, a human officer said from off-screen. No weapons charge. No shield flare. Rourke nodded. As expected. You want to open a channel? The officer asked. Not yet, Rourke replied. His gaze lingered on the alien ship displayed before him, elegant and cautious. Let them see us first. The Perseverance remained dark, its systems humming in disciplined restraint. Rourke had waited a long time for this moment, longer than most species measured history. Humanity had learned patience the hard way. Back on Kerox 9, Threx felt the weight of that unseen scrutiny settle over him like gravity. The human ship was no longer approaching, no longer maneuvering. It was simply there, an undeniable fact in the void. Commander, Krellin said softly. High Command is requesting an immediate status update. Threx did not answer at once. His eyes were fixed on the human vessel, on the truth it represented. The legends had not exaggerated. They had diminished. Send them everything, Threx said finally. And tell them this. Krellin looked up. What, Commander? Threx drew a slow, steady breath. The humans are not gone, he said. They are active, disciplined, and watching us by choice. As if punctuating his words, the human vessel adjusted its lights, not to illuminate weapons, but to reveal its hull in full, unashamed clarity. For the first time since entering the dead zone, Threx understood the true nature of the conflict unfolding before him. This was not an encounter born of chance. It was an introduction, long delayed and carefully controlled. And somewhere across the void, a human captain had decided that the time for silence was almost over. The first clear transmission arrived without flourish, a narrow-band visual feed that cut through the static like a blade. Commander Threx Valkyr watched as the image resolved, revealing a single figure framed by the interior of the human vessel. The being on the screen was unmistakably human, tall, broad, and marked by time rather than ornament. His expression was calm, almost disarmingly so, with eyes that carried the weight of long experience. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the United Nations vessel Perseverance," the human said, his voice even, unhurried. "You are observing sovereign human space." The simplicity of the statement unsettled Threx more than any threat display could have. There was no bluster in the human's tone, no attempt to dominate the exchange. It was a fact, offered without expectation of debate. "I am Commander Threx Valkyr of the Karoks Combine," Threx replied after a measured pause. He met the human's gaze through the screen, refusing to yield ground even as his instincts urged caution. "This region has been classified as uninhabited for centuries." Rourke inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement rather than a concession. "Classifications change when the data is incomplete," he said. "We chose not to correct that assumption." Threx felt a flicker of irritation, quickly mastered. "You allowed the galaxy to believe your species extinct." "We allowed the galaxy to stop looking," Rourke corrected. "There's a difference." The words settled heavily over the bridge of Karoks 9. Threx sensed his crew leaning in, every ear attuned. "Why reveal yourselves now?" he asked. "If secrecy served you so well." Rourke did not answer immediately. His eyes shifted briefly, as if consulting information beyond the frame. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new gravity. "Because you crossed a line that matters to us." Before Threx could press him further, an alarm cut through the bridge, sharp, insistent. Krellin turned from his console, tension etched across his features. "Commander," multiple warp signatures emerging at extreme range. "Vector indicates approach from the outer spiral." Threx's gaze snapped back to the holotable. 3 new contacts bloomed into view, angular and aggressive in profile. He recognized the design immediately. A patrol flotilla from a rival expansionist faction, notorious for testing borders through force. "They're charging weapons," Krellin said. "Targeting the human vessel." Rourke's expression did not change, but something hardened behind his eyes. "This is what I meant," he said calmly. "We don't object to observation. We object to extinction-level curiosity." Threx's instincts screamed at him to withdraw, to disengage from a confrontation that was rapidly escalating beyond his mandate. Yet his eyes remained fixed on the human captain. "They will not heed warnings," he said. "They see you as a relic to be claimed." Rourke nodded once. "Then watch carefully, Commander Valkyr. This is the part the legends never explained properly." The enemy ships opened fire. Lances of energy tore across the void, converging on the Perseverance in a dazzling storm of color and force. Threx felt his breath catch as the human vessel remained dark, unmoving, as if resigned to annihilation. Then space itself seemed to flinch. The human ship responded with surgical precision. No wild barges, no overwhelming spectacle. A series of tightly focused discharges rippled outward, each one timed with flawless accuracy. The first enemy vessel lost propulsion, its momentum carrying it helplessly past the engagement zone. The second suffered a catastrophic systems failure, its shields collapsing in silence. The third attempted to retreat, only to be clipped by a final, merciless strike that left it adrift and powerless. The entire exchange lasted seconds. Silence reclaimed the void, broken only by the fading echoes of destroyed ambition. Threx stared at the aftermath, his mind struggling to reconcile the efficiency he had just witnessed. The human ship had not fought like a conqueror. It had fought like a guardian, eliminating threats with the minimum force required. Rourke's image flickered back into prominence on the display. "We withdrew because the galaxy needed room to grow without us shaping every outcome," he said. "But we never stopped watching. And we never stopped preparing." Threx found his voice, though it felt distant in his own ears. "You could have ruled," he said. "After what you just demonstrated, no power here could have opposed you." Rourke's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, though there was no humor in his eyes. "Ruling breaks things," he replied. "Protecting them takes restraint." The words struck deeper than Threx expected. He had commanded fleets, enforced borders, justified violence in the name of order. The human before him spoke of restraint as a strength, not a weakness. "We are not your enemy, Commander Valkyr," Rourke continued. "But we will not allow anyone to turn our absence into an invitation." Threx inclined his head, a gesture of respect he had not anticipated offering. "Then what are we to you?" he asked. "Observers? Trespassers?" Rourke considered the question, his gaze steady. "Potential allies," he said at last. "Or potential students. That choice isn't mine to make alone." The transmission dimmed, not severed, merely eased back into standby. Outside the viewports, the human vessel held its position, unthreatening and immovable all at once. Threx exhaled slowly, aware that the galaxy he understood had just shifted beneath his feet. The legends had spoken of human ferocity, of wars that reshaped star maps. What they had failed to capture was this: control, patience, and a willingness to stand in the dark until standing became necessary. As the wreckage of the hostile patrol drifted silently away, Threx realized that this encounter was only the beginning. The humans had stepped back into the light not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy that some boundaries were guarded by more than treaties. And whatever came next would be shaped by how the rest of the stars chose to respond. The aftermath of the brief battle hung in the void like a held breath. Wreckage from the disabled patrol drifted away in slow arcs, its once aggressive geometry reduced to inert fragments. Commander Threx Valkyr remained at the holotable, aware that every decision he made now would ripple far beyond his own career. The presence of the human vessel was no longer a mystery to be solved but a reality to be navigated. Captain Elias Rourke's image returned to full clarity on the display, his posture unchanged, as though the violence that had just unfolded required no adjustment to his composure. "You've seen enough to understand why we don't announce ourselves lightly," he said. "Intervention has consequences." Threx inclined his head, a gesture of measured respect. "Your restraint is unexpected," he admitted. "Many in the galaxy believed humans vanished because you destroyed yourselves." Rourke's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "We came close," he said. "Survival teaches hard lessons. One of them is knowing when your presence does more harm than good." The words resonated with Threx in ways he had not anticipated. The Karox Combine prided itself on order through visibility, patrols, borders, constant assertion. The humans had chosen the opposite path and yet had retained a power that dwarfed most modern fleets. "What happens now?" Threx asked. "You've revealed yourselves to us. Others will notice the disturbance. Secrets don't remain contained." "They don't have to," Rourke replied. "Not anymore. Humanity doesn't seek to reclaim what it left behind. We seek to prevent what nearly ended us." At Threx's silent prompting, Krellin brought up long-range data relayed from High Command. Responses scrolled rapidly, layered with caution and disbelief. The Combine's leadership demanded clarity, intent, numbers, capability. Threx relayed their concerns without embellishment. "They will want assurances," he said, "and proof that your species does not intend to dominate the balance of power." Rourke gave a short, humorless exhale. "Power imbalances are inevitable," he said. "What matters is how they're used." He gestured, and the background behind him shifted, revealing a broader tactical display. Threx felt a chill as faint markers appeared, dozens, then hundreds, scattered across unstable regions of space. "Human vessels," Rourke explained. "Observation posts, response units, guardians. Most run darker than this one. They exist to intervene only when a collapse threatens to cascade." "You've been policing the galaxy," Threx said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Rourke shook his head. "We've been containing its worst impulses," he said. "There's a difference. We don't decide how civilizations rise. We only step in when someone decides others shouldn't exist at all." The distinction mattered, and Threx knew it. He had seen too many campaigns justified as necessary order that ended in eradication. The humans' philosophy was not passive, but it was deliberate. High Command's latest directive blinked into prominence. Authorization for limited diplomatic engagement. No hostility. No withdrawal. Threx met Rourke's gaze once more. "The Combine accepts your terms of restraint," he said.
For now.
Knowledge of your existence will change how others behave. Some will fear you. Some will test you. Rourke's expression did not waver. They always do, he said. Legends invite challenges. A brief silence followed, not awkward, but contemplative. The human captain's eyes drifted momentarily to the stars beyond his ship, as if measuring distances that meant something different to him than to anyone else present. What should we call you? Threx asked at last. Your people, I mean. If you are no longer ghosts. Rourke looked back, a faint smile touching the corner of his mouth. Call us what you always did, he said. Humans. The name survived for a reason. The Perseverance began to withdraw, its motion smooth and unhurried. There was no dramatic flare of engines, no final warning. It simply turned away from Kerox 9 and slid back into the dark from which it had emerged. Sensors struggled to track it almost immediately. Its signature thinned, blurred, and then vanished entirely, leaving only empty space where certainty had briefly existed. On the bridge, no one spoke. Threx felt the weight of what had been revealed settle into a quieter understanding. Humanity had not disappeared. It had matured, learned the cost of being seen, and chosen its moments with care. As Kerox 9 resumed its patrol, the dead zone no longer felt empty. It felt watched, not with hostility, but with vigilance. Threx knew that the galaxy would soon feel the same, whether it welcomed the sensation or not. He allowed himself one final glance at the star field where the human ship had been. Legends, he realized, were not stories of what was lost. They were warnings preserved by those who survived long enough to become them. And somewhere beyond the reach of his sensors, humans waited, not as conquerors, but as the quiet line between existence and oblivion.